Okay.
Who am I looking at?
Right here.
You're right here.
Okay. So this is an interview of Charles Manning Jr. It's March 8th, 2008. It's 1:30 in Durham, California. He was born November 17th, 1921. He's 86 years old. He participated in World War II. He was a private in the Army. And he went to navigation school in Matherfield, California. And became a navigator in the Air Force of August of 1943 when he was commissioned.
Yeah.
So, why did you become involved with the Army?
Well, I didn't want to be drafted because you didn't have that quite right. So I volunteered to be. I volunteered in the Army to become a navigator.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that was in 1942.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't want to be drafted where they would just send me any place.
Mm-hmm.
So I enlisted to become a navigator, and that took about 9 months, in which time I became an officer upon graduation.
Can you tell us about the training camp?
Yeah, well, really my first training camp was down at Santa Ana, and that's where they gave us a bunch of tests, and for about 2 weeks to find out what we were good at, and if our eyes were all right, and our physically we were all right, and it was kind of fun down there because every weekend we'd go into LA or Hollywood, or me and a bunch of guys went to Laguna Beach because there wasn't too many of us there, and it was more fun picking up girls there. So then when I finished there at Santa Ana, they sent those to become navigators up to Sacramento, Mather Field, which of course I enjoyed it because being from I lived in San Francisco at the time with my parents, so I was close to them, and I finished my training as a navigator in August 1943, and I believe I had a 2-week about a 2-week pass at that time. I had to report to Great Falls. No, I had to report to Ephrata, Washington, which is halfway between Seattle and Spokane, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the United States put the crews together. And because I don't know whether it said it in my orders, but I was designated to go into a B-17 as a navigator. So this is where they put all the crews together for training the next month or two. So to get our training, we flew together, and we went down to Redmond, Oregon, which is a beautiful spot. And it's prettier now, I understand, because it's really filled up with a lot of people, and it's just above Bend, Oregon. And it's right in the middle of a valley where we had beautiful flying circumstances where we had Mount Hood to our west, and also the Three Sisters Mountains, and then the Black Hills to the east, and then to the south was Crater Lake. And we flew all around there every time we flew, and it was very, very beautiful. Then we got our orders to go overseas there, and so I think we got another few days delay en route, they called it, and reported to let's see, where was it? Someplace in Nebraska. And we thought we were going to ferry a plane over as a crew, but it turned out that there was another crew that was going to fly the airplane, and we were going to be passengers. So that's the way they did a lot of them, to get them over to England. And so we went from there up to Detroit, and then to Maine, and from Maine we headed over the water and landed in Belfast, Ireland. And that was a crummy place because it was very cold in the 40s, and they put us in they called them Nissen huts. That's one of those galvanized iron, kind of a dome shape and metal shaped hut, and they had one for every crew. And when we got in there, we had a nice stove right in the middle of the place, and we had made a fire, and we got the fire red hot. But when we tried to get into these beds, the beds were damp and cold, and it just froze our butts off. As you can imagine, getting into this coarse wool blanket and stuff, and it was damp because the dampness over there is much more than here. So then in a couple of days, we took a boat across the British, across from Ireland to England, and from there we went to the base we were going to fly out of, and that was Deanthorpe. That's where our air base was. That's about 100 miles north of London. And the first mission I flew was with another crew, because they sent the navigator, the bombardier, and the pilot and co-pilot flew with another crew first, just to orientate themselves what was going on. So I flew with another crew. The target was Bordeaux, or right near Bordeaux, which is just northeast of Spain, in France. And it was a very difficult mission, because we had to fly over a lot of water to get there, because we went across a piece of France first, and then went out over the water again. The trouble was the the Germans had a base right on this peninsula, and so the fighters really got to us. But we made it back, and there's one bad experience where we were lagging behind, and the Germans were picking off the planes that were straggling back. But I don't think we got attacked. I think we were going to be the next one they were going to pick off. But when we came into England, it was all fogged up, and the a storm had come in and reversed the winds, so we were short on fuel. So I heard that we had about 15 minutes of gas left, and the pilot asked me, what's our ETA to the base? And I told him 12 minutes on this heading, and by God, I was right on. And he landed the plane on the perimeter road of the Air Force Base. This was, which isn't as wide. It's like a 2-lane highway instead of about a 6-lane. And as he taxied, we ran out of gas. And the other thing I wasn't quite right about, it was an Air Force base, but it was about 5 miles short of our base. So it was probably a good thing that it happened that way, otherwise we wouldn't have made it to our base, which was 5 miles further. So I just keep going on those things? Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So I got 18 missions in, and all of them were scary, let's put it that way. There was a couple that were fairly easy, that were just the target was just inside the French coast, because this is before they invaded France, or we invaded France. And I had one or two missions, maybe I just one, I guess, to Berlin, which was very hard, and a couple of others were hard, were missions to southern France, southern Germany really, and then another one up on the Baltic Sea. That was the longest one, and I think that was about 13 hours. And we had to fly all the way across Germany at an altitude of about 10,000, and which made it very difficult, because that made the flak, which you know what the flak is? That's the big guns they have on the ground that shoot up, and these big puffs of smoke. They have them to explode at a certain height, because they could figure our height, and they shoot up these the artillery, and they would explode at our altitude.
Wow.
And they had a couple of hundred guns down there, and they were firing at us as a squadron that flew together, and they knocked out quite a few of us flying at 10,000 feet, where we usually flew at around 20,000. So And this was long because we had to go all the way across Germany and then up to the Baltic and then across the Baltic and then we were in the Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, back to England. And on the last, my last mission was to Dessau, which is right near Magdeburg. And Dessau is spelled T-E-S-A-U. And we started getting hit. We got hit by flak, and we started dropping behind, and then a couple of fighters tried to pick us off, and we were hit very badly. And I know 2 or 3 of the gunners in the back part of the plane were killed, and the pilot was killed. And during this battle, and I had a fire right in back of me in the nose of the plane, and the bombardier was in front of me, and I was trying to put out this fire, and out of the corner of my eye I see the pilot bailing out. So I really used my head then. There's nobody flying the plane. So what do? I just get right on his tail and jump out of the plane too. And we were the only 2 that got out of the plane alive. The bombardier didn't make it, and none of the gunners. And it was a crew of 10, so the rear of the plane must have been really shot up. And we landed in a field, the co-pilot and myself, and we had hysterics. We made it, you know, because it was such a horrid experience, really. And there was a couple of Germans that picked us up right away, and then they drove us to this park. I guess it was a park of some sort within this small town, and that's where they had the rest of the crew, and they're all dead, and I had to identify them. They were very hard to identify. The only way I really could was find their dog tags. And they buried them right there, all together. And they had a bunch of Polish POWs, and most of them were Polish, I think. And they're the ones that dug the holes and put the bodies in. So then they took us to this air base where they put us in a courtyard, and there's about 30 of us at this point from other crews, but just Bob and myself were the only ones we knew, and the rest of them were officers and enlisted men. And we learned fairly soon that we were at the airport that we bombed. And they had a couple of German shepherds about the size of this thing, and they were barking at us. And the German officer came in about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and just madder than hell, and yelling as a, like Germans yell, like you see on television. Ah, you know, junk at us, and he was slapping some of us and everything, and we really thought, well, this is it. We're dead. We're dead meat here. But it turned out that this officer had lost his wife and a couple of children. So, I mean, we figured we'd be the same way if that happened to us. So, we didn't, that was the end of that. But then, oh yeah, I gotta just tell you this. Then they took us out of there, about six or eight of us at a time, and they searched us, and we had to take all our clothes off, and then they searched us, and they took us 4 abreast and 2 columns. So there's 4 here and 4 here, and we were walking across. I don't know what it was inside the air base. It was mostly lawn or cement. And we had, when they walked us about a quarter of a mile, or about that long. And it was pitch black, dark, just a little bit light. And they had 2 Germans in front of us with submachine guns, 1 on each side, walking, keeping us in this file, and then one German to the rear on this long leash with a dog, a German Shepherd like it. And the dog was barking and growling and everything, and the goddamn Germans would make us slow down and say "Achtung," and force us down with the goddamn machine guns. And then the guy in the back would let out a little leash, and the dog would growl and bark and bite at our heels. And it just scared the living shit out of us. It was bad. Because as soon as we'd start moving up ahead a little bit, the 2 guys with the submachine guns would turn to us and try and slow us down. So they had a little fun with us. So anyway, then we left there by a truck, I guess, and they took us through a big train depot, and a lot of people there, and they were yelling at us, they spit at us and everything else, and it was very ugly. So we finally got to this Frankfurt, I think it was in Frankfurt is where we were at, and they interrogated us, and if anybody got smart, you know, and thought, well, I'm not going to tell them a damn thing, you know, and they act belligerent to them, they keep them about 3 or 4 days without food or water, and just, you know. But if you just gave your rank and serial number, that's all we were supposed to give, and didn't put up this arrogant way against them, then they just say okay. And So anyway, then we went to another base where they had the Red Cross, and this is where we got the first help, where they had some new clothes for us and some decent food and toothbrush, and etc. So this, and then there was this sign where we went in to state who we were. It said on the sign, it said our feet are hurting, and we murmured, but then I saw a man who had no feet. This is from the Bible someplace. And boy, you saw that, and you're just, you know, we're alive, and what's our gripe at this point? So that was very touching to us. So anyway, then we were there a couple of days, and they shipped us out, and we went to our permanent camp for a while, which was in Sagan. And that was right on the old Polish and German border, which was east of Berlin, about 70 miles, I guess, something like that. And we got there, and there was 3 compounds, maybe 4. I think it was 4 by the time we left there. And they're all officers, except they had some enlisted personnel. Probably 10% were enlisted personnel to do the maintenance on all the barracks and compounds, because the Germans were pretty much going by the Geneva Convention, which is how they were supposed to treat POWs. The main thing about it was an officer, if you were an officer, you couldn't be worked under any circumstances. If you were an enlisted man with a sergeant, like a sergeant, they could work you if you volunteered. And anything below a sergeant, they couldn't do anything with, make them work. So anyway, there was 3 compounds at that time, and in each compound there was about 2,500 people, and most of them officers, like I said. And in one compound was the ones the officers were from the beach in France. What's the name of that beach? Well, I can't remember, but it starts with a D. And this is where the English got beat, and they got much of the personnel off the beach over to France, but there was probably 10,000 men that the Germans captured. Dunkirk, this was the name of the beach, or this town. And so these guys were already there 4 years. Imagine what they were like. And anyway, they were the ones that you've probably seen. There was a movie there where these English guys made tunnels underneath the compound, underneath the barracks and such, and beyond where all the barbed wire was to get free. And it took them, it took them a couple of years to dig these. But anyway, in each compound, which I said there was 3, and there was about 2,500, and each barracks within a compound held probably about 100 men. So there's quite a few of us, and I was shot down on May 28th, 1944, and it was my 19th mission. And we'd just gone through Christmas, and my birthday was in November, and then Christmas. Then around the 10th of January, it was very cold. The temperature at night was around 0 degrees or -10, below 0. And they had made us move out. Now we thought this was going to happen because we could almost hear or we heard that the Russians were on the move to get into Germany. But anyway, around the 10th of January, they actually did, and they told us to get out right away, and we left there at midnight, about midnight or 1 o'clock, and it was about 0 to -10 degrees, and it was a mess. And I gotta go to the bathroom. You girls want to go? There's the march.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it wasn't very good. The Germans were completely unorganized, and we marched. We figured it out. We marched 100 kilometers in about 30 hours. Now that's like walking from here to Reading, not Red Bluff, Reading, with the temperature around 0 to -10 in the snow.
Wow.
And it was snow that was frozen, so which made it worse. You're slipping all over the place. And then we stayed overnight at one spot. This was after though, and we marched to a town. The name of it was Moscow. It's M-U-S-C-A-U. It's not Moscow. M-U-S-C-A-U, and that was very much a relief because they put us in a pottery factory, and that was this big factory with all there's steam and fires in it where they're building pottery of all sorts, and so it was really warm in there. We had about 1,000 of us in there, and anyway, then after that, we had to go another 10 miles, and then they put us on a train, and then the train went down to Nuremberg, and it was miserable there because it was an old Italian prisoner of war camp, about 6 months previous. And there was fleas and lice in there, and wasn't very good. And at this point, there was a shortage of food also. I mean, we had a shortage of food back at the other camp, but most of our food was through the Red Cross, and we got these parcels. And I think it was supposed to be one parcel per week per man, something like that. And when we left when we left Saigon, I think we were only down to about a quarter of a parcel a week. And then it was just about the same at this Italian prisoner of war camp, which was run by the Germans. Now, all the way through, it was fortunate for the Air Corps, for all the Air Corps personnel, is that we were we were governed by the German Air Force or the German Army, and not the SS. The SS are the ones that did all the dirty stuff that happened during the war, and hanging of prisoners and everything else, and shooting them. And periodically during the march, we ran into a couple of them, and of course they just wanted to shoot us all down. But anyway, the German Army and the Luftwaffe, which was the German Air Force, were relatively pretty nice to us. And so down at this Italian, at Nuremberg, which was the ex-Italian prisoner of war, we were about 2 miles from the marshalling yards, which is the train depot of Nuremberg. And every night there at Nuremberg, a Mosquito, which is a two-man plane, which you've probably heard about the Mosquitoes. They're all made of wood. They're a great airplane, and they fly up to about 30,000 feet, and then come down and come down to maybe 15,000 feet and drop a 5,000-pound bomb. And by the time the Germans would find out that this plane was coming, the bomb had gone off, and the Mosquito is well on its way, for England. So every night that happened. Boom! This horrendous boom. And then we also had, there at Nuremberg, we also had a major English bombing raid. And see, the English and the Americans made an agreement to where the English would bomb at night, and they would bomb differently than we would. All our targets were bombed during the daytime, and we went in and picked a target in or near a large town, like an Air Force, German Air Force target, or a machinery target of some sort. And we used that as a focal point that all the planes would want to drop their bombs on, and we did pretty well because we had a bomb. This bomb gadget, I can't remember the name of it, that worked pretty good. But the English said, no, we'll go at night, you guys go in the daytime. And with the English, they would just have the town as the target, just 10-mile radius as the target. So they would just scatter their bombs all over hell and gone. So we, knowing this, we had this major bombing raid in the middle of the night, and we knew they were going to bomb the whole area. And just before all the planes came in, a couple of planes had come in and dropped these lights that just kind of hung up there by parachutes right out in front of us, like from here to maybe downtown Durham, about a mile or two away from us. And oh my God, we went fruitcake, because we thought this is where they're going to bomb, not knowing what they do. Anyway, so they just lit up the whole place with these lights, you know, an awful lot of lights. And we were just jumping all over the place. But we learned that they were these were the lights to light up the marshalling yards of the railroad. And it was a bombing line, actually, it was, don't drop your bombs beyond this line. So they're actually protecting us. But at the time, we didn't know that. And it was kind of funny in a way. So anyway, then probably around the end of April, finally the Americans got through their line, and were trying to get to Berlin and so forth, along with the Russians. And we got they liberated us around the end of April, or no, it was about May 14th or 15th by the time they liberated us. But about the end of April, the Germans moved us again, and this time we had a general and a couple of high up colonels that said, listen, we're not going to walk the way we did last time. We're going to march 50 minutes and then have a 10-minute break, and then we've got to have a barn or something to sleep in that night. And the Germans obeyed, because they really screwed up on the other one, because what happened when it was all during that cold weather, they marched us for 3 to 5 or 6 hours at a crack without stopping in that cold weather around zero, and we were perspiring, you know, we were tired, and then they'd give us a 2-hour rest, and shit, we couldn't rest, because where are you going to sit, right in the snow? And then your feet would freeze up, and so that's not the way we should march. So they said we're going to march to 50 minutes and then get a 10-minute break. So and that's what happened. And we marched about 150 or 60 miles, I believe, from Nuremberg to where they had us go at, just above, I had it on my tip of my tongue. Oh, this big town in southern Germany, anyway, away from where the Americans were coming in, and so it was right near one of the big German camps where they had all the Jewish people. In fact, after we were liberated, we saw a stream of them coming out of that camp, and they looked like the March of Death. They were just pale gray people with just just skin and bones. And anyway, then General Patton actually liberated us about the 15th of May, I think it was. And they got us out of there within a week. And they took us over to Le Havre, and we got on a ship there headed for, and that took about 10 days. That was about it.
What was it like when you got home?
It was great, just absolutely great. But what was so funny, I lost probably, I was skinny, a skinny guy then. I probably weighed 165 and went down to 150, 52 or 3, something like that. But if you took a guy that, weighed about 250, he'd lose 70 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah. So, by the time I got home, I'd gained probably all that back and then some. Because on the boat, you could have anything you wanted, and I'd had 5 meals a day, milkshakes, hamburgers, candy. It was ridiculous. So,
You like to add anything, or?
No, I'm trying to think of that town in southern Germany.
Did you earn any medals?
Yeah, I got an air medal with 2 clusters, which means I got it 3 times, which is given to personnel when I first got there, it was every 5 missions you'd get an air medal, and so I had 18, and so I got an air medal plus a couple of clusters. Now there's my co-pilot. There he is now.
Aww.
Here I am. This is when I was a cadet.
Oh, wow.
This is a copy of my crew. Now see, I didn't tell you one thing. There is one thing I'd like to add. This is an air medal. When I wasn't able to go on the second mission with my crew here, and on their first mission, they got shot down, except I wasn't with them. And so I went with the crew that had lost their navigator. So I really had a second crew. This is the crew I trained with in the States, but I never flew a mission with them. And all these guys got out except the navigator. The navigator from the crew I replaced, he got his foot shot off, and they repatriated him. And so, let's see. Yeah. So this guy, where is he? Oh, him. Yeah, that's the co-pilot of the other crew. So he's the only one we talk about once a month over the phone. He got hurt. He got a little shrapnel in his lower part of his leg that bothered him the whole time we were at Saigon. So he didn't go on the marches because it still bothered him. He couldn't make it. Anything else?